A warm welcome to this workshop on fluency at IIT Bombay. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation to this. I'm Preeti Rao in the Electrical Engineering Department here on campus. And my area, of course, is signal processing. But in the course of this work, we were looking for literature from the education space. And one thing we found is that globally there is so much scholarship on literacy and language education, but not so much at all in India. So I'm so happy that the few experts that we've heard so much about in India are all more or less here under this roof today. So that's been a very nice and lucky a very good event for us. It's turning out to be something, and we are hoping it's going to be very productive, and it's like a beginning of engaging more with the community that matters to us in our work. So I'm very happy that we have for this morning session. So if you look at the program, we have a number of talks in the morning, 3 talks to be precise, and panel sessions in the afternoon. We are extremely pleased, and one very big driver of this workshop has been the Kendriya Vidyalaya Sangathan team, with Joint Commissioner N.R. Murli being one of those people who really helped us transit this from what was a lab prototype to a potential use case. So his encouragement and advice has been invaluable. And that was one of the drivers for this workshop in the first place, because they really want to see this, going somewhere and having a more complete, impact. So we start with Professor Narona, who is the professor in charge of the Tata Center for Technology and Design on IIT Bombay campus. He's also a faculty in the Department of Chemical Engineering. So he, Professor Narona will talk to us a little bit about the Tata Center on campus, and then we'll start with it.
Thanks, Professor Rao, and welcome to all of you again. So just to give you a brief sense as to why we are trying to hold this particular session here on campus, we have this entity called the Tata Center for Technology and Design with funding from the Tata Trust. We've been active since 2014 with a mandate to try and create solutions for the base of the pyramid. When you talk of an IIT creating solutions for the base of the pyramid, it tends to be tech heavy, right? And increasingly there's an element of industrial design as well, which has crept into it. But as we have tried to pilot a variety of programs in various sectors, which range from education, energy, health, sanitation, and so on, quickly come to realize that we need to pick up on our social science understanding. And in that sense, engage with other stakeholders as we try to integrate what we do better into what might ultimately function as a sustainable solution. So there's, in some ways, this challenge on us to create an end-to-end kind of paradigm where there's a more systematic assessment of what is needed on the ground in terms of sectoral problems, and then ultimately appropriateness of solutions. And then to try and build these on campus, okay, and in some sense, again, trying to do this in some kind of a research environment, so we're not under immediate pressure to deploy and scale. You get to the point where you then pilot some of these things and try to understand the efficacy of a particular proposed intervention and generate evidence which ultimately either will influence policy or will potentially exit in terms of some kind of a business model, some commercial business model. And we're encouraged to do these things. So in many ways, from an IT perspective, it's pretty unusual that we're looking at social impact challenges, which are typically hard to commercialize quickly, and which are things which usually take very long time scales to mature and then scale. So to try and therefore find mechanisms by which you can work on these problems, given that, for example, our engineering funding cycles typically are on 3-year mode, which limits what you can do. So how do you work in 5-year, 10-year kinds of modes and pull off solutions to really hard problems? And in that context, the Tata Trust trying to nucleate centers. There were 2 centers created, one at MIT, we are the second one, and try and get a bunch of stakeholders in the engineering sector to start thinking about these things. So that's a bit of a novelty in the Indian context as to what can get done. So should For those of you not familiar with the IIT system now, you'll be surprised to know that the IITs primarily are research institutes. We probably have more research students on campus than undergrads. There's increasing pressure on us from both big industry, but the government as well, to come up with engineering solutions to all kinds of things. But because we have had relative autonomy compared to other universities, we've now been able to open up departments of all types. For example, we have schools of management, we have departments of economics, we have Center for Policy Studies. And this allows us to start creating interdisciplinary teams on campus itself as we start tackling larger problems. So that's, again, a rather new context to how we therefore look at what can get done. So then when you have situations where there's potentially technology to be built, like what you're going to hear today on evaluating fluency, the question then comes up, what kind of internetworking do we need now to ensure that these things potentially deploy and become most effective and then scale rapidly? And in that sense, we try to now connect both upstream with people who are on the ground and understand these things much better than we do, but then also potentially with funders and other stakeholders who might guarantee success when it comes to scale, which can either be literally funding or in some cases policy. Right? So the Tata Center trying to foster these kinds of activities and steadily moving into a mode where we're trying to tackle some of the larger challenges. The Institute does do a fair amount of research on education technology. We do have a Center for Education Technology, but as you can imagine, we are under pressure to essentially scale and deploy what we do in the engineering education sector itself. So primarily aimed at improving the lot of colleges out there, for example, in terms of their defunct labs. And so trying to do things with lab education, trying to essentially stream our courses and make them available to engineering kids all over the country and so on. So there's that sort of stuff increasingly where we're under pressure to do. For the most part, we have stayed away from high school education, and simply because we have this thing called JEE, and therefore anything we touch when it comes to the high schools immediately pivots into some kind of a coaching scheme kind of thing, and so that's highly avoidable. But obviously there's interest in primary school education, and we have been engaging with a variety of stakeholders locally and elsewhere in the country when it comes to primary education as well. We've got, in particular, faculty from the design school interested in education content. And so there is, in some ways, this element now, as we debate the rest of the day on what can get done between technology, between policy, between funding, and where must things go. And it's not for us as technologists to drive the conversation. It's important that most of you who are sectoral experts come forward and then tell us what the major challenges are that you see. And it's for us to then react in terms of what can get done with technology. It's for us to quietly build these things and then pilot them and build evidence to the point where we think it's a safe transition into some kind of a stable, deployable solution, particularly with the government strongly involved at some stable point in the future. So with that, what I would encourage you to do is to therefore go beyond, in some sense, the narrow elements of what can get done with signal processing, which is obviously what brought Professor Preeti Rao to this particular challenge. There's things that can get done. So welcome you to explore what else can get done in the education sector, and we're glad to spend time with you throughout the day and inform you as to other programs that the Tata Center works on. Right? But I hope that you'll be able to deliberate on these things, and at some point later on in the afternoon, I'll be happy to understand where we can go, both in terms of the specific program that's being debated today, but also as a center in terms of grand challenges in the primary education sector. So with that, thanks. And welcome again.